Hello friends, welcome to this session. In this session, I am going to discuss the purchasing power parity. Friends, this concept is something through which you will come to know that how we compare the different countries in terms of the economic development, right? So what will be the coverage of this session? In this session, we will cover the concept of purchasing power parity, the examples, the GDP on nominal basis and GDP on the PPP basis. We will discuss the GDP rankings on the PPP basis, and we will also see the practice question. So, what do we understand by the purchasing power parity? So, when we hear the term purchasing power, so what does it actually mean? So friends, we have currency. So for example, in India we have the Indian rupee. Now from this rupee we can buy something, right? Now the value of this currency is dependent upon the amount of goods that this currency can buy, right? So for example, if this 1 rupee, it can buy 1 kg of an item, or it can buy the 2 kg of item. In out of these two cases, in the second case, that is when it is buying 2 kg, the purchasing power of rupee 1 is more, right? So more the amount of goods a currency can buy, more is the purchasing power. Less the amount of goods a currency can buy, less is the purchasing power, right? So this is the purchasing power concept, right? Now purchasing power parity. The term parity is basically to do a comparison. The purpose is for doing a comparison, for making a comparison. So before I move ahead, I would like to give one example from the day-to-day life. So that example will make the things crystal clear to you, right? So example is like that. Consider there are two friends. One is Miss Soni and another is Mr. Rohit. Both are the college time friends. Both are just qualified and completed their graduation, and they are well placed. Miss Soni, she is working in India, and Mr. Rohit, he is working in USA. The package, the annual salary package of Miss Soni is 20 lakh per annum, and annual package of Mr. Rohit in the USA is, if we convert into Indian rupee, this comes 30 lakh rupees per annum, right? Now apparently, if I ask you a question that who is better off, what is your answer? The answer is Mr. Rohit is better placed, because Mr. Rohit is getting 30 lakh rupees as the annual package, right? So this is what is the common inference, that more the income of a person, more should be the standard of living, right? Now let us see how they spend this 20 lakh rupees and 30 lakh rupees. So this 20 lakh rupees, if we see the expense diary of Miss Soni for a year, she spends on rent 3 lakh rupees, for fooding 3 lakh rupees, and for other expenses she spends 4 lakh rupees. So total 10 lakh is the expenses, and that means out of 20 lakh, if 10 is the expenses, the 10 is the saving. So 10 lakh rupees is the saving of Miss Soni. If we see Mr. Rohit, out of 30 lakh, so he is living in USA, so in USA the rent is high, right? So in developed countries, the cost of living is high. So if I can get one 2 BHK flat in Delhi NCR at 25,000 or 30,000 per month, 30,000 rupees per month, in USA it is not so. In USA, the cost of rent per month will be more than the cost of rent in India, right? So in USA, Mr. Rohit, he has to spend for the same 2 BHK 6 lakh rupees. For the fooding, he has to spend 6 lakh rupees. And for other expenses, he has to spend 8 lakh rupees. So 6 plus 6 plus 8, and apart from that also he has to spend 2 lakh more rupees because he is staying outside. So there are many other expenses which he has to bear. If like those expenses were not required if he would have been staying in India, so the total expenses comes to 6 plus 6 plus 8 plus 2, 22 lakh. And out of 30 lakh, if he is spending 22 lakh, that means 8 lakh is the saving, right? Now if we see all of them, like both of them, they are spending on almost similar item. Their standard of living is almost equal, right? And the saving of Miss Soni is high and saving of Mr. Rohit is less. So this condition you can correlate to your life also. You must be having some people in your life whom you know, and this is happening to them. But the question arises, why this happens? Why this happens? Why, despite the person in the USA having more income, is not having the high standard of living? Or why the cost of living is high in USA? So cost of living is high in USA because the rate of inflation is high in the developed countries. Over a period of time, there has been growth, and along with the growth, inflation also comes. So over a period of time, the inflation has actually been very, very high, and now their cost of living is at the peak, right? So from this example, the point that I want to make is that this per annum income 20 lakh rupees or 30 lakh rupees, we are judging the standard of living based upon this. So if I want to judge the standard of living, normally what do we say? In common sensical term, we say that if the income of a person is more, that means his standard of living is more. If the income of a person is less, that means the standard of living of the person is less. From this example, I want to show you that the argument that I just made is wrong. Or in other words, it is not necessary that more is the income, more is the standard of living. It is not true, right? So we cannot judge the standard of living of a person just based upon the income. Or in other words, we cannot judge the level of development in a country just based upon the per capita income of the people, right? So this is the argument I wanted to make through this example. I hope this example is crystal clear to you. I will give more examples. So before giving next example, what is the need of purchasing power parity? So need of purchasing power parity arises to compare the level of development of different countries in the fair manner, to compare the level of living standard of the people in the fair manner. Now let me give you one more example, and this example is called 1 kilogram wheat example, right? For the sake of simplicity, let us take two countries. One is India and another country is suppose France. Now, for example, the value of GDP of India is rupees 600, and let us change this country for more simplicity. Let us keep this USA. So GDP value is 600 rupees, and if we see the market based exchange rate between rupee and dollar is 60 rupees per dollar, right? So based upon this market exchange rate, how much is the value of GDP of India in rupee terms? So in dollar terms, the value of India's GDP comes to $10. The value of India's GDP comes to $10. Now, let us see one day-to-day transaction. So, let us suppose a person has to buy 1 kilogram of wheat, right? A person has to buy 1 kilogram of wheat. In USA, the wheat price is $1 per kg, and in India, the wheat price is rupees 20 per kg, right? That means if I see in 600 rupees how much wheat he can buy, so in 600 rupees in India he can buy 30 kg of wheat. But in USA, because in USA in the 600 rupees only $10 will come, so in $10 he can buy only 10 kg of wheat, right? So one thing you can see over here, that if we convert this 600 rupees based upon this 60 rupees per dollar, we can buy only 10 kg, right? However, in reality, in India, how much we are able to buy? We are able to buy 30 kg. But this market-based exchange rate, if we see based upon this value, we will always say that India's GDP value is just 10 kg. If we consider that India's GDP has only wheat as its product and only this item is there for the sake of simplicity, then any outsider will say that India's value is worth 10 kg of wheat, but actually India's worth is 30 kg of wheat. So this level of difference between 30 kg and 10 kg actually indicates that this market based exchange rate is not appropriate, because the market based exchange rate which is showing 60 rupees per dollar is not justified when we see that here this actually becomes 20 rupees per dollar, because here the wheat is coming in rupees 20 and here the wheat is coming in $1. So if we see from the perspective of the buying capacity of the currency, the exchange rate is actually 20 rupees per dollar. If we see from the perspective of purchasing power of the currency, then the exchange rate is how much? 20 rupees per dollar. This is the right way, right? I hope now you are able to see how this purchasing power concept actually makes the comparison of two countries much more fair compared to the market-based exchange rate. Compared to the market-based exchange rate, right? So, based upon the market-based exchange rate, how much is the value of rupees? The exchange rate between the exchange rate between the rupee and the dollar. This is rupees 60 per dollar, and based upon the purchasing power of the currency that we saw in case of the wheat, this is rupees 20 per dollar. So this divergence is big. And why this divergence happens? This divergence happens first because this market-based exchange rate is actually used for trade purposes. For trade purposes, the import and export. This is more used for the export and import purpose rather than being used for the calculation of level of development of a country. So, for example, if I say the USA dollar value is rupees 70 per dollar, how do we calculate that value? Like, why the value of rupees, the value of USA dollar is 70 rupees? Why it is so high? My question is, why the value of USA dollar is very, very high as compared to rupee? So there are many reasons. For example, the reason, what are the reasons? The reasons include USA is the reserve currency. USA dollar is the reserve currency. What is the meaning of reserve currency? That everyone wants to keep this dollar because dollar is something which anyone will accept in the world. This is the most acceptable currency. This is the most transparent currency. USA is the most transparent country also, like as an economy, right? So everyone has a faith on the US dollar. So that is the reason why the value of US dollar is high. It is not necessary that the purchasing power of that US dollar is really high, right? So the reason of this US dollar value being high is other than the standard of living. It is not exactly the purchasing power of this US dollar, but there are many other factors which are impacting this market-based exchange rate, right? So this market-based exchange rate actually does not show the real purchasing power of the currency. The real purchasing power of the currency is only possible through calculation of the purchasing power-based exchange rate, and this purchasing power-based exchange rate is actually required to compare the different countries and the level of development, right? That is why this purchasing power based exchange rate is calculated by the World Bank, right? The World Bank is the agency which is calculating this purchasing power based exchange rate, and the World Bank says that in 2014, if we see in 2014, rupees 17 approximately is equal to $1. So this is the value, this is the PPP based value. So the same thing which rupees 17 can buy in India, that amount of goods will be purchased from $1 in the USA, right? So actually based upon PPP, based upon the purchasing power of the currency, this 17 rupees is the correct figure. But if we see in practicality, the USA dollar rate to India's rupee is more than 70 or hovering around the 70 rupees, right? So this divergence between the 17 and rupees 70 is actually because of the reasons other than the purchasing power, right? So I hope now the concept of purchasing power parity is becoming much more clear to you, right? So as I move ahead, I will discuss the theory, right? So now let us show you the definition of the purchasing power parity. So purchasing power parity is defined as the number of units of a country's currency required to buy the same amount of goods and services. So in our example, buy the same amount of goods and services means 1 kg of wheat, right? Number of units of a country's currency required. How much currency is required of India's currency? Rupees 20 in the domestic market. So if we are buying from India, it is 20 rupees for 1 kg of wheat, as $1 would buy in the USA. So this $1 will buy 1 kg definitely. So how much is the purchasing power parity? 20 upon 1. So this is the definition, and you can see from our example this definition also. That example I will now discuss through the theory so that everything becomes crystal clear to you. So first I will give you 1 minute to read this PPT. Read this PPT and understand this PPT, and then I will discuss. But first you read so that things become much more crystal clear to you. So let me read out this PPT. Example, imagine that the market exchange rate between dollar and rupee is 60. $1 in the USA will buy 1 kg of wheat there. Corresponding money in terms of rupee, that is rupee 60, can buy 3 kg of wheat in India. Suppose that India's GDP is rupees 600. This will become $10 in the market exchange rate terms. If wheat is the only commodity produced in the world, you imagine it for simplicity's sake, one will think that India is producing 10 kg of wheat if we use the market exchange rate. Actually, India produces 30 kilograms of wheat. This higher volume of production in India is not expressed if we use the market exchange rate to measure the GDP. To overcome this defect and to accurately measure the GDP, we can use the purchasing power parity exchange rate. Under PPP, we measure the GDP of India by measuring how much wheat that rupee 60 can purchase in the India and $1 can purchase in the USA. Here, $1 in the USA can purchase 1 kilogram of wheat, whereas rupees 20 can purchase 1 kilogram of wheat in India. That is $1 is equal to 20. This is the PPP based exchange rate. This is the purchasing power parity exchange rate we obtained. Using this exchange rate, we can calculate that India's GDP of rupees 600 will become $30. Thus, in terms of PPP, India's GDP is $30 in contrast to the $10 we estimated by using market exchange rate. The PPP exchange rates help to minimize misleading international comparisons that can arise with the use of market exchange rate. If you ask how much unit of Indian currency is equivalent to $1 in terms of PPP, the World Bank has estimated it scientifically. The World Bank is using purchasing power parity conversion factor to correctly represent the PPP exchange rate. As per the World Bank estimate, 17.12 Indian rupee is equal to $1 in terms of purchasing power in 2014. So please, I'm giving you another 30 seconds. Please read this slide carefully and you will become crystal clear about the concept. Okay, let us move ahead. Now you are crystal clear about the concept of purchasing power parity. Let us discuss GDP on the nominal basis and GDP on the PPP basis. So if we want to compare two countries, how do we do that? For comparing two countries, first we see the value of GDP in their home currency. Why? Because all the countries, they calculate their GDP in the home currency, right? So if we take two examples, one is India and another is UK. So India will calculate in rupees and UK will calculate in pound, right? Now to make the comparison between the two countries, what will we do? We will convert these two into a common currency. We will convert into a common currency, and this common currency, let us say this is dollar. Now this conversion from rupee and pound into the common currency, this can either be based on the market based exchange rate or it can be based on the PPP based exchange rate. So please tell me, if we really want to compare the exact worth of the two countries, which exchange rate should we follow? Should we follow the market based exchange rate or should we follow the PPP based exchange rate? So answer is clearly the PPP based exchange rate. We just discussed that it is the purchasing power parity based exchange rate which will give the true value of an economy, because it is calculating the true value of the economy based upon the purchasing power of the currency. So same thing has been explained over here. Again, I will give you 30 seconds. Please read this slide and then we will start discussion. So GDP nominal versus GDP PPP. GDP, what is the meaning of GDP? The total market value of all final goods and services produced in a country in a given year. Each country reports data in its own currency. To compare the data, each country's statistics must be converted into a common currency. Two methods can be used. One is nominal, another is purchasing power parity. The nominal GDP estimates are commonly used to make international comparison. Under it, the market exchange rates are used for conversion. It does not take into account differences in the cost of living in different countries. Right? So for this, we can relate to the example of Rohit and her friend. Right? Fluctuations in the exchange rate of the currency. So the exchange rates keep fluctuating. They keep fluctuating because of the different global factors. Sometimes it is the Middle East war, sometimes it is the downfall of the USA, sometimes it is the trade war going on between the USA and the China. So there are different reasons because of which the fluctuation in the exchange rate happens, and based upon those fluctuation rates we conclude the value of a particular economy, and based upon that the ranking of the different countries keep changing. But does that change in the ranking of different countries GDP based on the market exchange rate reflect the true value, the true picture of the things? No, that is not the truth. So fluctuations in the exchange rate of a country's economy may change a country's ranking from one year to the next, even though they often make little or no difference to the standard of living of its population. So even though there is no difference in the exchange standard of living of the people, but still that ranking is changing just because of the market exchange rate fluctuations. In the purchasing power parity exchange rate, the rate at which, what is the definition of this? The rate at which currency of one country would have to be converted into that of another country to buy the same amount of goods and services in each country. So example, we have already given 1 kilogram wheat example. Now this is the data that you can see. The source of this data is International Monetary Fund, IMF, and IMF has indicated that if we see by the PPP basis, China is the first ranked country in the world, USA is the rank 2, and India is the rank 3, and this is basically the 2018 report, just 2 years ago. So China's GDP is having value of $25.3 trillion, USA $20.5 trillion, India $10.5 trillion, right? So this is the true worth, the true picture based upon the purchasing power. If we go on a nominal basis, it is the USA which is occupying the first rank. China is occupying the second rank, right? And I don't have the complete data regarding the nominal, because we are discussing the GDP on the PPP basis, so we will stick to this only. So based upon the PPP, these are the top 3 countries, but based upon the nominal GDP, that you can see the change in rank. So China, which is in the first rank as per the PPP, comes to second rank as per the nominal GDP, right? India comes to rank 6 or 7. It keeps hovering between rank 6 and 7. Otherwise, if we see on the PP basis, this is just rank 3. Little more theory to make things more clear to you. So PPP refers to the equality of buying capacity, right? So we are always talking about the buying capacity of the purchasing power. So buying capacity means purchasing power, and equality means parity, right? PPP was proposed by Gustav Cassel. So this is the name of the person who proposed this, and it is a method of determining the exchange rate based on the buying capacity of the respective currencies in their home country. The exchange rate is determined. So we discussed the example based on the buying capacity of the respective currency, right? So 1 kg of wheat, it can be purchased in just 20 rupees. PPP is an economic theory that compares different countries' currencies through a basket of goods approach, right? So in our example, we took the example of wheat only, but definitely wheat is not a single item in the country. There are many items, so we can include wheat, we can include rice, and so on. So we actually compare the basket of goods, not just one good. The prices of the goods and services in developed countries is very high. So we discussed the example of Mr. Rohit and her friend, right, who are having the package of 20 lakh rupees and 30 lakh rupees. So the prices of goods and services in the developed countries, that is USA, are very high compared to the developing and less developed countries. For example, India. Her friend was living in India, so she was enjoying the equal level of standard of living in the less price. It means the purchasing power of the money in the developed countries is lower. Yes. So purchasing power of the money in the developed countries is lower, and in the developing countries this is higher. So please be careful about this. Don't forget this. How do we calculate the PPP based exchange rate? So cost of goods X in currency 1, that is rupees 20, and cost of goods X, and in our example we took the example of wheat, in currency 2, that is $1. So purchasing power parity based exchange rate is rupees 20 per dollar. Now, what are the drawbacks of PPP? First, transport costs. So transport costs can impact the buying capacity because the imported goods, they cost more. Secondly, the tax differences. The government can have the different tax rate. So for example, in India and USA, the tax rate can be different. So that can impact the purchasing power of the currency. Government intervention. The government also intervenes in the tariffs. Sometimes the government reduces the prices of particular things for intentional purposes. It intervenes through subsidies, through MSP. So at that time, the purchasing power of the currency is not the true measure, right? Non-traded services. So there are many services which are not traded at the international level. For example, insurance. There are utility like electricity, labor cost. So they are not traded at the international level. So comparing the purchasing power of currency based upon these non-traded services will be inappropriate. And last, the market competition. So higher prices can be there because a company may have a competitive advantage over the other sellers. So that can be one reason where the PPP may fail. Here, one more diagram you can see why PPP rate is difficult to calculate. So we always say that PPP is reflecting much more true picture, but still why PPP is not frequently used. PPP is not frequently used because it is difficult to calculate the PPP's exchange rate. We don't have the appropriate data, and there are certain things which make it difficult to calculate the PPP based exchange rate. For example, in country A, the staple food can be soya, milk, olive oil, fish, rice, and in the country B, the staple food is milk, butter, beef, potatoes, etc. So comparison of food basket in the two countries is difficult. Similarly, public transport is good and free in country A, and in the country B it is very poor and expensive. So that will impact the cost of the goods. So there are many such practical factors because of which this PPP based exchange rate becomes difficult to calculate. But I am very much sure that this concept is crystal clear to you, right? Let us see the practice question. Which one of the following statements regarding the purchasing power parity is not correct? A. It is a method of determining exchange rate. B. Purchasing power of money in developed countries is higher than that of the developing and less developed countries. It's better than rate-based exchange rate as it compares the standard of living of people and stage of development. It was proposed by Gustav Cassel. So take 30 seconds and tell me what is the correct answer. So the correct answer, let us see, the question is which of the statement is not correct. Statement 1, this is correct. Statement 2, purchasing power of money in the developed countries is higher than that of the developing and less developed countries. This is wrong. I clearly mentioned that in case of developed countries, the inflation is very high, cost of living is very high, therefore their purchasing power is less. In the same amount of currency, they will buy less amount of goods. So this statement is wrong. It is better than rate-based exchange rate. Yes, this is true. And it was proposed by Gustav Cassel. This is also true. So answer is option B. B is the answer. So answer is option B, and I discussed this thing. With this, I complete this session. I hope you enjoy the purchasing power parity, and you will keep coming across this term in the newspapers. Please revise this lecture at least 2 times more to make this concept much more clear to you. And you can solve any type of question in the examination hall, and you can teach your friend. Right? I have given sufficient examples to make the things very clear to you. So with this, I complete this lecture. Thank you very much. All the best.